My son stole millions, murdered my wife, and left me trapped in this bed. Everyone thinks I'm a helpless vegetable after a stroke. But I'm not. I'm fully awake, faking it every day, watching and planning. Welcome to Brian's Stories. I share new life stories. Here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Drop a comment down below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I read every single comment and it helps me to know I'm not alone in this. My name is Victor Sterling. I built a massive tech company, Sterling Dynamics, from scratch with my wife Eliza. We had a daughter, Elena, and later adopted our granddaughter Lena, who means the world to us. I trusted my son-in-law Marcus completely. I brought him into the family and the business, treated him like a son. But he betrayed me. He stole millions, arranged the accident that killed Eliza, and then caused my stroke when I started suspecting him. Now he controls everything, my company, my money, this oceanfront mansion. Everyone believes I'm gone, mine trapped in a useless body. But here's the secret. I'm pretending to be paralyzed. I lie still, eyes half open, listening to everything while the machines beep around me. Why go this far? Because I created something terrible years ago, a secret surveillance software called Dark Code that spies on people worldwide. I meant it for good, but it became dangerous. The only way to destroy it completely is to let my empire crash publicly and then rebuild it clean. I even paid Marcus to play the perfect villain, to steal, scheme, and take over so the world would see him as the monster and force the truth out. My granddaughter Lena is the only one who cares. For me now. She's gentle, talks to me like I'm still here, and she's starting to notice my tiny signals. Tear, a finger twitch, even Morse code taps saying, "Help me." It really kicked off the day Marcus walked into my room thinking I couldn't hear or see. He spread out the papers on the desk by the window, the ocean waves crashing outside, and signed away full control of my life and company, power of attorney, right in front of my open eyes. He hummed casually, smelled of expensive cologne, and even spoke to me like I was nothing. "No, more worries for you, Victor." Then he left, clicking the door shut. But as he walked out, a single tear rolled down my face. I couldn't stop it, and my finger twitched just a little. He didn't notice. He also picked up a small screw I'd loosened from the bed frame and pocketed it, muttering about it falling off something. He had no idea I was doing it on purpose, slowly preparing my escape. Later that day, Lena came in to care for me. She's kind, with Eliza's eyes, and she talks to me softly, smoothing my blanket, brushing my hair. She mentioned seeing Marcus leave and said something felt wrong. I wanted to tell her everything, but not yet. I have to wait for the perfect moment. She's already spotting my clues. The blinks, the taps. Soon she'll understand Grandpa is still fighting. As night fell and the mansion grew quiet, I lay there planning. My AI system, Orion, is still watching, waiting for my signal. Marcus thinks he's won, but he's playing right into my hands. The downfall has started. The truth is coming, and when it does, Dark Code dies with it. After Marcus closed the door behind him, picking up that small piece of metal from the floor without a second thought, the Azure mansion fell back into its usual cold, quiet. The long hallways stretched under steady blue, LED lights that never warmed the air, and surveillance cameras in every corner kept their red dots glowing as they turned silently to follow any movement. A few hours later, the door to my bedroom opened again, and Lena walked in carrying a stack of fresh, white sheets folded neatly over her arm and a plastic basin filled with warm water. She closed the door softly with her elbow, set the basin on the rolling table next to the bed, and started the same routine she followed almost every day. She pulled the old sheet from under the blanket, carefully so the tubes in my arm would not pull, then slid the clean one underneath, tucking the corners tight at the foot of the bed. Her hands moved slow and steady, and she looked down at me with eyes full of quiet pity as she smoothed the fabric across my chest. "It's a beautiful afternoon out there, Grandpa," she said softly while she worked. "The sun is making the water sparkle all the way to the horizon. I wish you could see it." She adjusted the pillow under my head, then reached for my right hand to check that the IV tape was still secure and the monitor clip sat properly on my finger. As soon as her warm palm covered my hand completely, I tapped against her skin with my finger. Short, long, short, 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 short. Long, short, long, short, long, long, HELP. Lena's hand stopped moving at once. She stared down at our hands for several seconds, then lifted her eyes to my face. I kept my expression exactly the same, eyes half open and unfocused the way they had been for months. She leaned forward a little, her hair falling across her cheek, and whispered so low only I could hear, "Grandpa, did you just—" I tapped again, slower and clearer. HELP. Her breath came in sharply, and her fingers tightened around mine. "Oh my God," she whispered, tears filling her eyes instantly. She glanced quickly toward the nearest camera on the wall, then shifted her body to block its view of our hands. "You're in there. You're really in there." Her voice shook, but she kept it quiet. I gave one firm squeeze with my fingers to answer her. Lena pressed her free hand over her mouth to stop any sound from escaping, and a tear rolled down her cheek onto the fresh sheet. She held my hand for a long minute, breathing fast, then forced herself to calm down. She finished smoothing the blanket, tucked it in at my sides, and stood up straight. She picked up the old sheets, folded them over her arm, and lifted the basin. At the door she paused, turned back toward the bed, and gave me the smallest nod anyone watching the cameras would never notice. "I'll be back soon," she said out loud, calm and normal, the way she always did. Then she opened the door and stepped into the hallway, pulling it closed behind her with a soft click. The room returned to its steady hum of machines and distant waves. The blue lights stayed cold. The cameras kept blinking, and Orion continued recording everything as it always had. But everything had changed. The peaceful family picture that Marcus had painted for the world, the one where I was gone and he kindly managed everything while Lena quietly cared for an empty shell, cracked wide open in that single moment. A third person in this house finally recognized that I was still fighting, and because Lena heard me, the plan I'd waited months to start could finally move forward. The mansion looked exactly the same from the outside, tall glass walls shining in the afternoon sun, expensive cars parked in the drive, security gates closed tight. But inside, the real story had begun. Lena would not let this go. She would lie awake tonight thinking about those taps on her palm. She would remember the games I taught her years ago when the power went out during storms. And tomorrow, when the house was quiet again, she would start searching for whatever I needed her to find. Marcus still believed he controlled everything. He had no idea that the game had just turned. Against him, I lay under the clean sheets, listening to the monitors beep in their steady rhythm, watching the red camera lights blink, and waiting for the next step. Because now Lena was with me, and soon the truth would start coming out. That night, the mansion remained silent while Marcus continued working downstairs and the rest of the staff had already left for the evening. Lena entered my room again without turning on any lights, closed the door behind her carefully, walked directly to the nightstand, opened the drawer, and removed the old leather notebook that I had positioned there specifically for her to find months earlier. She moved to the window area where moonlight provided enough illumination, sat down facing away from the cameras, opened the notebook, and flipped through the pages until she located the one with the folded corner that marked the exact spot I intended her to see. She read the sentence that I had underlined 3 times in bold ink. "The creator's responsibility doesn't end when the product is sold. It ends when the consequences are paid for." Lena paused after reading it once, then read it again more slowly before she looked toward the bed and whispered across the distance. "Grandpa, this sentence explains everything you're doing right now, doesn't it?" I responded by blinking once in a deliberate and slow manner to confirm yes. She nodded immediately to show she understood. Completely, closed the notebook securely, and placed it inside the large front pocket of her sweater where it would remain hidden from any casual observation. She approached the bed without delay, leaned down close enough that only I could hear her clearly, and stated in a firm but quiet voice, "I see the full picture now, and I promise I will help you carry out whatever needs to be done so the consequences can finally be paid." She reinforced her commitment by squeezing my hand strongly once before she straightened up and turned toward the door, ready to leave the room. When she had taken only a few steps toward the exit, her phone vibrated once inside her pocket, causing her to stop immediately. Lena reached for the device quickly, unlocked the screen, and read the new message that appeared from an unknown sender. "The one who pays the highest price is not Victor, but the one who trusts him." Lena left my room with a notebook containing the core principle of the plan. She was completely committed to helping me expose Marcus, although she didn't yet know the ultimate goal was to destroy the entire empire. However, immediately after leaving, she received an anonymous warning message, proving that someone outside knew about her, taking the notebook and her unconditional trust in me. The warning alluded to the heavy price to be paid by anyone who helped me. Downstairs, Marcus was still finalizing the transfer procedures, believing he had won and completely unaware that Lena had become an active ally against him. Lena returned to her room, locked the door, and placed the notebook under her pillow. She stayed awake all night, haunted by the warning and trying to figure out how that third party could have known about her actions so quickly. The fight was no longer just between Marcus and me. It had expanded, and the risk was shifting onto Lena. I knew that the next morning, Lena would take the next step, accessing the Orion system using the login information I had hidden to collect evidence of fraud in Eliza's death. Even though Marcus slept soundly, convinced of his assured victory, the plan had advanced to a critical stage, and the danger was increasing at the same rate. The morning after that eerie text warned Lena about the price of trust. She couldn't shake the feeling that every camera in the mansion was watching her a little too closely. She waited until Marcus's sleek black car rolled out of the drive, his briefcase packed with lies for his city meetings, and the maids had finished their chatter in the kitchen. Only then did she slip down to the basement, her heart thumping like a drum in her chest. She punched in the code I'd taught her years ago, back when she was just a curious teenager asking how Orion made the house think. The server room door clicked open, and she darted inside, pulling it shut behind her. The hum of machines greeted her, and she sat at the main console, her fingers trembling as she typed my old ID, Victor Sterling, Administrator. The screen flashed green, my name glowing at the top like a beacon. Full access granted. For the first time in months, someone was holding the keys to my world again. "All right, Grandpa," Lena whispered, her voice barely audible. "Let's find the truth." She started with my medical logs, the safest place to look without raising flags. Page after page of numbers scrolled by. Heart rates, oxygen levels, medication schedules. Then she saw it. Doses of sedatives bumped up, with no doctor's approval. Visitor logs showing Marcus in my room at 3 a.m. 4 a.m., times he never mentioned to anyone. Her breath hitched. "You snake," she muttered, copying the files to a tiny black drive she'd tucked in her jeans. But she didn't stop there. That notebook sentence about responsibility, it was like a fire in her bones, pushing her deeper. She dug into older archives, folders buried so far back Marcus must have thought they were dust. Using my secondary key, she unlocked a hidden section, and there it was. Eliza log, dated the week my sweet Eliza left this world in that so-called accident. Lena's hand froze over the mouse. "Grandma, she breathed, clicking the file. The screen turned red as blood. Access denied. Advanced firewall. Biometric confirmation required. She tried my ID again. Nothing. She typed Eliza's birthday, the date we'd celebrated with roses and her favorite lemon cake. Denied. The system logged her attempts. Silent but deadly. Lena leaned back, staring at Eliza. Log locked behind that digital wall. It was guarded heavier than the company's bank. Accounts heavier than my own life's records. Whatever was in there, Marcus didn't just want it hidden. He wanted it buried forever. "You're not getting away with this," she said to the empty room, her voice hard now. She closed the session, yanked the drive out, and slipped from the room like a shadow. Back in her bedroom, door locked, she sat on the floor with the drive in her hand. Her knees pulled up tight. The medical files she'd copied were bad enough. Proof Marcus was keeping me drugged, sneaking in at night. But that locked file, it wasn't about money. It was about murder. Eliza's murder. And someone knew she'd found it. That text last night, the one who pays the highest price is not Victor, but the one who trusts him. It wasn't random. Someone was watching her every move. Someone who understood what opening that file would unleash. Marcus strutted through his meetings that day, charming board members, practicing his speech about turning my company into a charity to make himself look like a saint. He had no clue Lena had just stood at the edge of his darkest secret, her fingers inches from tearing it open. I lay in my bed, the machines beeping steady, counting the minutes. I knew that firewall would hold her back today. I built it to do exactly that, to make her see how high the stakes were, to make her feel the weight of what we're really fighting for. Because this isn't just about taking Marcus down for stealing. It's about proving he took my Eliza from me, from us. Lena didn't eat lunch. She stayed in her room, staring at the drive, planning her next move. "I'm going back tonight, Grandpa," she whispered, like I could hear her through the walls. "I'll find a way in, I swear." The anonymous sender of that message, they knew she wouldn't stop. They knew she was getting close to a truth that could burn this family to the ground. Marcus came home that evening, loosened his tie, poured a whiskey. He laughed on a call about how smoothly his plans were going. He thought he was untouchable. He didn't know the girl he calls his daughter was about to break his world apart. I waited in the quiet, feeling the hours crawl toward midnight. Lena would go back down there. She'd fight that firewall with everything she had, and someone hiding in the shadows was waiting for her to try. Because what's in Eliza log isn't just fraud. It's worse. It's the kind of secret that destroys lives. The kind that proves a man could kill his wife's mother and sleep soundly every night after. The next day after Lena hit that unbreakable firewall guarding Eliza. Logs. Marcus stepped into the spotlight and changed the game for everyone. He scheduled a grand press conference in the heart of the city and invited every major news outlet because he wanted the world to see him as the grieving yet generous son-in-law. He walked to the podium with that practiced smile and waited for the cameras to settle before he began speaking in a voice full of emotion. "Thank you all for coming today," he said clearly. "As you know, my father-in-law, Victor Sterling, built an extraordinary company from nothing, and now, while he rests in his long recovery, I believe it is time to honor his true legacy in a way that will touch thousands of lives. That is why I am announcing that Sterling Dynamics will redirect substantial assets into the new Sterling Family Foundation, a charity devoted to providing technology, education, and opportunities for children from disadvantaged communities everywhere." The room filled with warm applause and flashes from cameras because reporters loved the story of a man stepping up during tragedy. Marcus paused to let the moment land and then continued with just the right touch of sadness in his eyes. "Victor always spoke about giving back," he added softly. "This foundation will carry his vision forward and ensure that his name lives on through acts of kindness and hope." Headlines appeared almost instantly across every Screen because the narrative was perfect and touching. Marcus Vance transforms tech empire into charity powerhouse, honoring Victor Sterling with generosity. Everyone praised the move as selfless and inspiring. But while the world applauded his words, Marcus quietly submitted legal filings to replace the entire board of directors with individuals who answered only to him because those new members would approve every decision he made without hesitation or question. Lena watched the live broadcast from her room and felt anger rise because she recognized the announcement for what it truly was, a clever way to liquidate assets while wrapping himself in praise. She opened financial news sites and watched the reaction unfold in real time because investors immediately began selling shares and questioning the sudden shift away from profit. Stock prices dropped noticeably while forums filled with urgent posts from shareholders, demanding explanations and accusing Marcus of dismantling the company under the cover of charity. Trading desks buzzed with frantic calls and emails flew between major holders because no one felt comfortable with the unexpected direction. Then, deep in one popular investor discussion thread, a brand new anonymous account posted a single comment that cut through all the noise. The perfect setup. Nothing more, no context, no signature, just those 4 words hanging there. The thread paused for a moment before replies. Poured in because people shared screenshots and asked who knew enough to write that phrase. The comment spread quickly across platforms and became the question everyone repeated while digging for more information. Lena read it several times and felt a chill because those words matched the warning she received and confirmed someone outside the mansion understood Marcus's real intentions perfectly. She closed her laptop and stood at the window, staring at the ocean because she realized this public move was Marcus feeling confident enough to seize everything openly. Marcus finished the conference, accepting congratulations and answering soft questions about his inspiring decision because reporters focused on the emotional story rather than the business details. He left the stage smiling broadly and climbed into his car, believing the positive coverage would silence any doubters and make his board changes unstoppable. He had no idea that one short comment was already traveling through financial circles and planting seeds of suspicion in places he could not reach. Because the perfect setup became the phrase, repeated in private chats and analyst notes alike. I lay in bed, listening to his voice echo through the house speakers because I had anticipated this exact moment and designed part of my plan around his arrogance pushing him to go public. His charity announcement combined with the board overhaul forced attention from the outside world, and that attention was precisely what I needed to begin turning the tide. Lena walked to my door and stood there for a long minute because she understood now that Marcus had just played his boldest card, thinking no one could challenge him. She whispered through the wood, "He thinks it's over, Grandpa." But he just gave the world a reason to look closer. The rumor spread faster than Marcus expected because investors called emergency meetings and journalists shifted from praise to questions about asset valuation and long-term strategy. That anonymous post gained momentum and encouraged more people to examine the details behind the charity facade. Marcus arrived home that evening, loosening his tie and pouring a drink to celebrate because he believed the narrative now belonged entirely to him. He remained unaware that the perfect setup was trending in certain circles and drawing scrutiny he had not anticipated. I waited in the quiet, knowing this external event marked the true catalyst because the world's eyes were finally turning toward the mansion and toward Marcus. The larger scenario I planned so carefully was beginning to unfold exactly as required because public attention would force mistakes and reveal cracks. Lena returned to her room and prepared for another late visit to Orion because the announcement gave her renewed urgency to break through the firewall guarding Eliza Log. She knew time was running shorter than ever and the cost of waiting had just become much higher. The perfect setup indeed, but not for the man who spoke those pretty words. Today, the night after Marcus's charity announcement and that mysterious, perfect setup comment set the financial world buzzing. Lena sat alone in her room with her laptop open, and her heart racing because she knew the moment had come to choose a path that could either save us or destroy us all in an instant. She had the encrypted drive full of irregularities from my medical logs and traces of Marcus's money games, but the locked Eliza log file haunted her because it promised answers to questions she barely dared to ask. She opened a new tab and pulled up the website of a high-profile law firm known for taking down corrupt executives because one voice in her head screamed to act now while Marcus was still basking in his press glory. "If I send everything tonight?" she whispered to the glowing screen as she began typing an email summarizing the fraud, evidence, and the suspicious visitor records. A lawyer could file injunctions by morning and freeze the board changes before Marcus locks them in forever. Her finger hovered over send because the thought of reporters at the gates and Marcus's perfect smile cracking on live television felt like sweet justice after months of silent suffering. But then she stopped and deleted the draft line by line because the other voice, the one that knew Marcus better, grew louder and colder. He would never let it happen quietly, she said aloud while closing the tab completely, because she remembered the way Marcus's eyes narrowed when someone challenged him in family meetings and how quickly he made problems disappear. Public accusation would make him desperate. Desperate men do brutal things. He could wipe servers clean overnight or worse. Make sure Grandpa's care takes a fatal turn before anyone investigates. She leaned back against the headboard and hugged her knees because the fear felt real and immediate. I can't risk Grandpa's life on a maybe. I need more, irrefutable proof that survives his revenge. She opened Orion again instead and logged in with my old credentials because the quieter path suddenly felt like the only safe one, even though it meant more lonely nights of searching. "I'll keep building the case through you," she told the screen as she navigated back into Marcus's directories because waiting for solid evidence of murder alongside the fraud would make any accusation unbreakable when the time came. She downloaded additional files, emails to accountants, scanned contracts promising board seats for favors because each piece strengthened the picture of theft she was assembling carefully. But her focus shifted when she noticed a folder she had overlooked before, labeled simply Old Memories. She clicked it and watched photos load slowly across the screen, scanned prints from years ago showing Marcus, younger and carefree at gatherings she didn't recognize. She scrolled through them quickly at first, but then slowed because one woman appeared in nearly every image, standing close to Marcus with his arm around her in ways that felt intimate and familiar. Lena's breath caught in her throat because even in the small thumbnails, she recognized the smile and the tilt of the head that belonged to someone she loved dearly. She opened the final photo in the set and felt the world tilt because Marcus stood in a sunlit garden, pulling the woman close while both laughed at some private joke, and her face was half cut off at the edge of the frame as if someone had cropped it deliberately to hide most of her identity. But the visible half, the gentle curve of the cheek, the small gold earring I gave Eliza on our 25th anniversary, the way the hair fell across the shoulder, was unmistakable because it belonged to my wife, long before Marcus ever entered our family through marriage to Elena. Lena's hand covered her mouth as tears welled up, because the timestamp placed the photo more than a decade earlier and proved Marcus knew Eliza intimately in a secret relationship no one in the entire family ever suspected. She zoomed in on the cropped edge and whispered through shaking lips, "You were with Grandma years before you married." "Mom, and then she died." The wrong choice now. Sending incomplete accusations to a lawyer with only questions and a damaged photo would create chaos Marcus could exploit because he would deny everything convincingly and destroy whatever remained while painting her as confused or vengeful. but continuing quietly through Orion offered the chance to uncover full proof inside Eliza. Log that no denial could overcome because the connection she just discovered ran deeper than any simple accident and pointed toward motives one had imagined. Lena closed the photo slowly and wiped her eyes, because the revelation shifted everything she thought she knew about the family history. She looked toward my door down the hall and nodded once because she understood my guidance, now more than ever. "I'm staying with Orion," she said with quiet resolve. "I'll get the whole truth before I strike." Marcus slept peacefully down the hall, believing his charity move had bought him safety and time, because he remained unaware that Lena had just seen evidence of his hidden past with Eliza. I lay in bed counting the hours, because this discovery was the turning point I hoped she would reach, and the fear of Marcus's revenge would keep her careful a little longer. The wrong choice could unleash chaos. No plan could contain, because the connection between Marcus and Eliza suggested motives far darker than money. The night Lena discovered that cropped photo of Marcus with Grandma Eliza, proof he had known her long before he ever joined our family, she didn't sleep a wink because the wrong choice now could unleash chaos no one could control, and the connection she uncovered felt darker than any accident. She sat on her bed with the laptop closed and her hands pressed to her mouth because the photo changed everything she thought she knew about the man sleeping down the hall. She opened the laptop again and stared at the law firm tab she had almost filled out earlier, because one part of her still wanted to call a lawyer at dawn and let the world tear Marcus apart with accusations of fraud and worse. "If I go public tomorrow," she whispered to the quiet room while imagining headlines and police at the door. The board changes stop cold and investors force an audit before he moves another dollar. But then she pictured Marcus's face when the news broke, cold, calculating, capable of anything, and she closed the tab fast because she knew public accusation would make him lash out brutally, and he could destroy evidence or silence witnesses before anyone believed her story. "He'd come after Grandpa first," she said with a shiver, because the late-night visitor logs already proved he wasn't above sneaking into my room when no one watched. "I can't risk that. Not when I'm this close." She looked toward my door and nodded once, because Grandpa had guided her this far with Morse code and hidden notebooks, and she decided right then to trust the path he laid out. "Orion it is," she said firmly, while plugging in the encrypted drive and logging back into the system with my old credentials, because quiet collection felt like the only way to build a case strong enough to survive Marcus's revenge. She navigated straight to Marcus's financial directories and communication logs, because tonight she needed everything, every transfer, every email, every file that proved he was stealing from the company and covering his tracks. She highlighted folders one by one, offshore accounts, board member bribes, charity paperwork that didn't match the public story, and her finger hovered over the master command. "This is it," she breathed. "All of it." She pressed download all on Orion. The progress bar started climbing fast because terabytes of data began flowing to her drive, while the server fans whirred louder in the basement below. Lena watched the percentage tick up, 10, 20, 30, because for the first time she felt truly powerful with Grandpa's system answering only to her. 50%, 70, 80. Then the server room door opened downstairs with a soft hydraulic hiss she heard through the baby monitor she had hidden weeks ago. A thin red light beam swept across the hallway. Like a laser, the Orion screen in front of her went black. Power off. Complete silence. Lena's heart stopped because she realized someone was down there right now and the download had just been cut dead. She yanked the drive free, 92% complete, and shoved it under her mattress. Because whatever waited in that server room was worse than she ever imagined. Marcus had set a physical trap to stop her, and it had just sprung. The moment Lena slipped back into the server room, after the power cut triggered by Marcus's trap, and carefully stepped over the red laser grid he had installed to catch intruders. She knew the danger had escalated far beyond what she expected because the consoles remained dark and the fans silent while her heart pounded loudly in the quiet basement. She reached the main panel and pressed the hidden restart switch I had shown her years earlier during what seemed like an innocent tour, and the screens flickered to life in emergency mode because Orion responded with basic access that allowed her to restore the interrupted session quickly. Lena whispered to herself as the progress bar reappeared. Almost everything downloaded before the science shut down. 92% of Marcus's financial records. And communications are mine now because that alone proves the fraud he's been hiding for years. She saved the remaining fragments to her drive and exhaled in relief because the evidence felt solid enough to build a strong case against him. But then her eyes caught a new folder buried in the root directory, one that had not appeared in any previous search, because the name alone made her blood run cold. Dark Code Final DLL. She remembered my words from that late night when she was younger, and I spoke in a grave voice about a project from my past that began with noble intentions but grew into something monstrous Dark Code was meant to protect. I had told her while looking her straight in the eye, but it watches when it shouldn't and takes what it wants, because if anything ever happens to me, promise you'll destroy it before it destroys everything else. Lena clicked the file and watched the password prompt appear because she understood this was the dangerous technological secret I warned her about all those years ago. She tried several combinations, my birthday, the company founding date, but each failed with a soft denial tone that echoed in the empty room. Then she paused and typed Eliza's exact birthday, the way Grandma always wrote it on cards, 6/4/1948, and pressed enter because something told her that was the key I would choose for something this personal and painful. The file opened. A single document loaded slowly across the screen, revealing page after page of global companies, major technology firms, financial institutions, even government agencies, with detailed status markers showing active surveillance streams, installed backdoors, and continuous data collection running in real time because Dark Code had been watching the world for years without anyone knowing. Lena scrolled through the list with growing horror because hundreds of names appeared, alongside notes about leverage points and stored secrets that could ruin reputations or shift markets overnight. "This is how he does it," she whispered in disbelief. "This is how Marcus stays ahead of everyone and accumulates wealth no legitimate business could provide because Dark Code gives him power no one should possess." She now understood Marcus's true motive completely because access to this surveillance tool explained his confidence and cruelty, while the list showed how he blackmailed or manipulated anyone who stood in his way. But one question burned brighter than all the evidence on the screen, because if Dark Code was this dangerous and I knew about it all along, why had I not destroyed it myself long before the stroke and the family war began? Lena closed the file slowly and copied it to her drive because she realized Marcus's greed made perfect sense now, yet the remaining piece, what my true objective was in letting everything reach this point, remained hidden and troubling. She powered everything down carefully and stepped back over the lasers because she knew Marcus's motive completely. Now yet the question of why I allowed Dark Code to survive still haunted her. She returned upstairs with the drive clutched tight because the surveillance list explained everything about his confidence and cruelty, while the discovery pushed her closer to understanding the full sacrifice required. Marcus slept upstairs believing his trap had scared away any intruder because he remained unaware that Lena had restarted the system and uncovered the heart of his power. I lay in bed counting the hours because this discovery was the turning point I planned for her to reach, and the knowledge of Dark Code would push her closer to grasping the larger plan. Designed long ago, Lena reached her room and sat on the bed staring at the drive because she now held proof of Marcus's empire, yet the lock on my real objective remained closed. The wrong path here, acting too soon with incomplete understanding, would create chaos no one could survive because the connection to dark code ran deeper than fraud or even murder and touched the very foundation of what I built decades ago. The week that followed Lena's discovery of dark code became a secret marathon of late nights and whispered questions because she returned to the server room every evening after Marcus retired to his office or left for meetings, and she worked tirelessly with Orion to uncover the full extent of his crimes while the mansion slept around her. She fed the old black box data from Eliza's car into Orion's reconstruction engine and watched as the AI built a perfect 3D model of that rainy night 5 years ago because the simulation played out on the main screen with headlights, cutting through sheets of rain and the coastal road curving dangerously toward the cliff. Lena leaned closer and muttered to herself as the model reached the final turn. "Come on, show me what really happened." The car's sensors flashed green at first, indicating full function, but then blinked red in the last seconds because the lane assist and emergency braking systems went offline, simultaneously with a command override that Orion highlighted in bright yellow. She paused the simulation and zoomed in on the code log because the disable sequence carried a timestamp and signature that matched Marcus's private access key. This wasn't an accident, she whispered with tears filling her eyes, because the proof sat undeniable on the screen and proved Marcus had intentionally blinded the RTI car's safety features moments before Eliza lost control. "You killed her. You murdered Grandma." She saved the reconstruction multiple times and labeled it clearly because the model played like a silent accusation she could show anyone and no one could deny what it revealed. But she pressed on because the dark code list had shown her Marcus's power, yet she needed to connect it to me and the stroke that trapped me in silence. She searched medical archives and room backups until she found an audio file buried in a maintenance folder from 3 months ago and played it with the volume low because Marcus's voice filled her headphones cold and calculated. "Make sure the DNR is on file for Victor," he said calmly to someone on the line. "If his heart stops or anything happens, no resuscitation. We can't risk him waking up and remembering things he shouldn't." The doctor's voice answered hesitantly, "But his condition is stable and—" Marcus interrupted sharply. "Stable enough to be a problem later. Just do it." Lena stopped the recording and pressed her hands to her mouth because the "do not resuscitate" plan wasn't medical caution but a deliberate instruction to let me die if the opportunity arose. "He wanted you gone too, Grandpa," she whispered through tears because the audio proved Marcus had been planning my end for months. She worked every night for 7 straight days, building the case layer by layer because the evidence grew into folders she labeled carefully. Fraud trails from dark code profits, the accident reconstruction showing intentional disable, the DNR audio proving intent to silence me forever. She whispered encouragement to the empty room. Each time a new piece locked into place because the picture of Marcus's cruelty became clearer and more monstrous with every file. On the 7th night, she sat back exhausted but satisfied because everything she needed sat ready in a master folder, and she highlighted it all for final transfer to a secure offline drive. "This is it," she said with quiet triumph as the copy progress bar began climbing because the evidence would destroy Marcus completely when the time came. Then her phone buzzed on the desk beside her with a new email notification from an anonymous address that carried no subject line. She opened it. One line waited. "Check the recycled folder. The evidence has been planted." Lena's blood turned cold because she opened the recycled directory immediately and found duplicates of her carefully built files with subtle alterations, timestamps shifted, code lines changed, audio clipped just enough to look fabricated. Under scrutiny, she whispered into the silent room with growing horror. Someone's been in here with me the whole time. Marcus remained upstairs, asleep, believing his system secure because he had no idea another hand had touched Orion and planted false trails among the real ones. Lena stared at the screen because she now held truth and lies side by side and couldn't tell which would condemn Marcus and which would condemn her if presented to the wrong eyes. Someone else was pulling strings behind the scenes, and that someone wasn't Marcus. The moment Lena opened that anonymous email, warning her about planted evidence in the recycled folder, her blood ran cold because she immediately navigated to the directory and found duplicates of her carefully built files waiting there with subtle alterations that would make them look forged under any serious scrutiny. She compared the originals side by side on split screens because the accident reconstruction remained untouched and authentic down to the last timestamp, while the financial trails showed tiny changes, amounts shifted by small percentages, dates adjusted by days, signatures added where none existed before. "This is real," she whispered as she ran the 3D model of Eliza's crash again and watched the sensors disable themselves in that fatal moment because the code override carried Marcus's unique key and no amount of tampering could hide the deliberate intent behind it. He murdered her, there's no doubt now. But when she opened the financial folders and cross-checked against public records Orion pulled from external sources, the discrepancies became obvious because transfers that appeared massive in her originals showed as legitimate expenses and independent audits, and emails she thought damning now read as routine business correspondence with forged headers that didn't match server logs. "Someone planted half-truths," she said aloud while her voice shook because Marcus was indeed a murderer, yet the money crimes pointed to a larger hand guiding him or using him as cover. "He's not the mastermind. He's the tool." She leaned back in the chair and stared at the screens because the realization hit her like a wave. Marcus killed Eliza and tried to silence me, but the fraud on the scale she first uncovered required resources and planning beyond what he possessed alone. "Who's really pulling the strings?" she asked. The empty room, because the planted evidence protected the true financial architect while letting Marcus take the fall for murder if caught. Marcus remained upstairs preparing for another board call because he believed his charity move had bought him time and the traps in Orion would scare away any intruder. He had no idea Lena had separated real proof from fake and now held undeniable evidence of Eliza's murder while the money trail led somewhere darker. I lay in bed listening to the quiet house because this midpoint discovery was the turning point I designed long ago, and Lena's realization that Marcus wasn't the sole mastermind meant she was ready for the larger truth about my plan. Lena closed the forged files and isolated the authentic ones because the accident, reconstruction, and DNR audio stood clean and devastating, while the financial evidence now pointed to an unseen partner profiting from dark code and using Marcus as the visible face. "Grandpa, what aren't you telling me?" she whispered, because destroying Marcus for murder felt right. Yet leaving the real money power untouched would change nothing. She prepared to copy the verified evidence to a new secure drive because the clean files would convict Marcus of murder beyond doubt, and the planted ones explained why someone wanted her to fail or take the blame. Just then, a notification flashed across the main Orion screen in red text that made her freeze, activating Lazarus strategy. Target: destroy main data feed. Lena stared at the words because she had never seen that command before, and it carried my personal authorization code from years ago. "Lazarus," she repeated softly while the system began wiping massive sections of financial records and dark code logs in real time because the target wasn't just Marcus's data. It was the core feed of the entire company network. She tried to stop it, but the process locked her out because the strategy ran with highest priority and projected completion in minutes. "You're destroying everything," she said in growing horror, because the plan suddenly revealed itself as far larger than removing Marcus. It meant burning the company to the ground, from the inside. Marcus remained unaware upstairs because the wipe targeted only the hidden feeds he used while leaving public systems intact. I waited in silence because Lazarus was the heart of my redemption, and the moment Lena saw it activate meant she finally stood at the edge of the full truth. The remaining revelations would shatter everything she believed about family and sacrifice, because my plan included destroying my own empire to kill Dark Code forever. The days after Lena watched Lazarus begin erasing the Dark Code feeds felt like the calm before a storm that was already breaking, because Marcus's carefully built world started cracking from the outside while he paced his office with phone calls coming in one after another. Regulators requested documents about certain offshore transfers because anonymous tips had reached the right desks, and journalists asked pointed questions about the charity's true beneficiaries, while investors demanded emergency meetings to understand why assets were shifting so quickly. Marcus slammed his phone down after the fifth call and barked at his assistant through the open door. "Get my security team here now, because I want the entire upper floor locked down. No one in or out without my approval, and that includes nurses, maids, everyone." He ordered his personal guards, the men he paid directly and not through Orion, to station themselves at every staircase and elevator leading to my living area, because he needed to control access completely while the investigations closed in. Lena heard the footsteps and low voices from her room because the guards took positions with quiet efficiency, and the mansion's upper level became a fortress overnight. She whispered to herself as she watched from the crack in her door. He's panicking because the financial strike is hitting him hard, and he knows someone is feeding information to the authorities. Marcus spent hours on encrypted calls, trying to move what money he could and shred what papers he dared, because the rapid investigations triggered by my old allies who had waited for this signal uncovered layers he thought were buried forever. He paced the halls, muttering curses, because every blocked account and frozen asset felt like a noose tightening around his neck. He stopped outside my door and stared at it for a long minute, because the blockade gave him the privacy he needed to finish what he started months ago. He dismissed the nearest guard with a sharp gesture and slipped inside my room alone, closing the door softly behind him. I lay still as always, machines beeping steady, eyes half open to the ceiling, because I heard his footsteps approach the bed and felt the air change when he leaned close. Marcus held a syringe filled with clear liquid in his hand and uncapped it slowly, because the needle glinted in the low light while he studied my face for any sign of awareness. "You've caused enough trouble from this bed," he whispered, with venom dripping from every word, because the investigations had his name on them now, and he believed I was the only one who could have orchestrated the strike from silence. He reached for the IV line taped to my arm and positioned the needle carefully, because the drug inside would stop my heart quietly and permanently, while the DNR order he forced through months ago would ensure no one tried to bring me back. "The play is over," he whispered as the needle touched skin. "Your real death is the only thing that cannot be faked." He pressed the plunger. The liquid began flowing, but the next blow would not land as he planned, because someone unexpected was about to intervene and turn his perfect murder into the beginning of his end, my dear friend. The moment Marcus pushed that plunger and the cold fluid began flowing into my IV line, everything slowed to a crawl, because I felt the drug spread through my veins like ice water, while my heart stuttered and the monitors started beeping faster in warning. Marcus stood over me with the empty syringe in his hand and a look of grim satisfaction on his face, because he believed this was the end of every threat I posed from my silent bed. He leaned close and whispered one last time, "No more games, Victor. No more surprises." The alarms screamed louder as my pressure dropped, and my breathing grew shallow, because the toxin worked exactly as he planned, and the DNR order he forced through months ago, meant no nurse would rush in to save me. Marcus stepped back and watched the numbers fall, because he waited for the flat line that would make his control permanent. Then Orion's calm voice echoed through every speaker in the mansion and beyond, because the system broadcast the announcement I had programmed long ago. We regret to inform the public and stakeholders that Victor Sterling has passed away at his residence. Further statements will follow from the family. The words carried across news alerts and company channels because the world outside heard them at the same moment Lena did in her room downstairs. Lena dropped the phone she had been holding and ran toward the stairs because the guards, Marcus, posted blocked her path with crossed arms and stone faces. She screamed my name through tears that came sudden and fierce because she believed Marcus had finally done it. He had taken me from her forever. She collapsed against the wall, sobbing uncontrollably, because everything they fought for felt lost in that single announcement, and the evidence she collected seemed pointless now that I was gone. Grandpa, no, she cried over and over, while the guards stood, silent, and the monitors in my room flatlined at last. Marcus walked out of my room calmly and closed the door, because he thought victory was complete, and the investigations would fade with no one left to push them. He poured himself a drink downstairs and allowed a small smile because the blockade kept Lena away, and the world mourned a dead man. Lena sat on the floor with her face in her hands because despair washed over her in waves, and the mansion felt emptier than ever before. She believed the fight was over and Marcus had won everything, the company, the secrets, her future, just as she thought everything was truly lost and darkness closed in completely. Her laptop chimed softly from her room with a new encrypted message notification that carried my personal seal. She wiped her eyes and stumbled back to open it, because the timestamp showed it sent automatically 24 hours earlier. The message read exactly as I wrote it long ago. They will think I am dead. Act as if I am dead, and prepare for the final act. Lena stared at the words through fresh tears, because the truth hit her like lightning. I wasn't gone, and the death was part of the plan all along. Someone had turned the tables completely. I had manipulated my own death. The moment Lena read my message, they will think I am dead. Act as if I am dead, and prepare for the final act. The tears stopped falling because confusion and hope fought inside her like fire and ice while she sat frozen on the floor with the laptop glowing in the dark room. She read the words again and again because the timestamp proved I sent it 24 hours earlier. The encryption carried my personal seal that no one else could forge. She whispered to the screen as if I could hear her. You're alive. This was planned. Because the Orion announcement still echoed in her ears, and the mansion remained sealed with guards outside my door, while the world mourned a man who might not be gone at all. Lena stood slowly and walked to the window, because the realization crashed over her in waves. The stroke, the silence, the evidence trail, even Marcus's growing boldness, all of it felt orchestrated far beyond simply exposing a thief and murderer. She pressed her forehead to the cold glass and spoke softly to her reflection because the pain of being used cut deeper than any grief. You let me believe you are helpless, she said with a voice that cracked. You let me risk everything night after night. While you pulled strings I couldn't see because the plan was never just about taking Marcus down. It was about something bigger, and you used me to get there. She turned back to the laptop and opened this secure folder I had hidden for her because the message included a path to one final file labeled, For Lena, when you're ready. She clicked it with trembling fingers, and my face filled the screen in a video recorded months ago while I still moved and spoke freely. I looked straight into the camera and began with the words she never expected. Lena, my sweet girl, if you're watching this, then Lazarus has begun and the world believes I'm gone because the only way to force Marcus into the open and destroy Dark Code completely was to make him think he'd won everything. But there's one truth I've kept even from you, until now, because it will hurt more than anything else. I paused on the recording and took a breath, because the next words carried the weight of decades. Marcus is my son, I said quietly, my biological son from a relationship long before I met Eliza, because I was young and foolish, and I paid him years ago to marry Elena and enter our family while promising him power if he played the role I needed, the enemy everyone could hate. Lena's hand flew to her mouth as fresh tears came, because the revelation struck like lightning and turned every memory upside down. I paid him to deceive everyone, I continued on the video, including you, because the only way to create enough public outrage and legal pressure to activate the full destruction of Dark Code was to stage this war from the inside and let him believe he was winning until the final moment. The recording ended with my face close to the camera and my voice gentle but firm. I'm sorry I used you, Lena. I'm sorry for the pain, but you were the only one I trusted to carry the light when everything went dark, because you have Eliza's heart and my stubbornness. The final act is coming. Be ready. The screen went black. Lena sat in silence for a long minute because betrayal and love twisted together until she couldn't tell them apart. Marcus wasn't just her mother's husband. He was her uncle by blood. I wasn't just her grandfather. I was the architect who placed her in danger for a greater purpose she never agreed to. She felt isolated in the mansion full of guards and lies because the two men who shaped her life had hidden the biggest secret of all from her. She curled on the bed and let the tears come freely this time, because the pain of being a tool in my redemption cut deeper than any fear of Marcus ever had. But even through the tears, she whispered into the dark, "You should have told me, Grandpa. You should have trusted me with the whole truth." The house remained sealed in mourning because the world believed I was dead, and Marcus celebrated his victory quietly downstairs. Lena wiped her face and sat up because the final act waited, and she now knew she would have to face both men. Her grandfather, who used her, and her biological father, who tried to kill him. The unthinkable was coming, and she was right in the middle. The hours after, Lena watched my video confession, learning Marcus was my biological son and that I had paid him to play the villain, felt like the longest night of her life, because betrayal cut deeper than any grief she had ever known, while the mansion remained sealed and the world mourned a death that wasn't real. She sat on her bed with the laptop closed and tears drying on her cheeks, because the man she called Grandpa had used her as a pawn in a game far larger than revenge. And the man she called her stepfather was actually her blood uncle who murdered her grandmother. She whispered into the darkness, "You should have told me everything from the beginning, because I would have helped anyway, and I would have understood the sacrifice. But the pain of being kept in the dark, of risking her life night after night without knowing the full truth, made her chest ache, because she felt isolated in a house full of lies and guards." Then she opened the laptop again and watched the video once more, because my words about Dark Code and redemption echoed louder than the hurt. The only way to destroy it completely was to let the world believe I lost everything I had said, and she finally saw the scope of what I planned, because sacrificing honor, family, even my own life was the price to kill the monster I created long ago. Lena wiped her eyes and nodded slowly, because the betrayal still stung, but the purpose behind it began to shine through. "You did it to protect the world from Dark Code," she said softly, while closing the video, because destroying that surveillance beast meant more than punishing Marcus, and justice for Eliza required ending the tool that gave him power in the first place. She stood and walked to the mirror, because she looked herself in the eye and made the choice that changed everything. "I'm still angry," she admitted to her reflection, "but I won't let your sacrifice be for nothing. Because if this is the only way to finish Dark Code, then I'll see it through." She sat back down and opened Orion with steady hands, because the final act waited, and Marcus had scheduled an emergency board meeting for the IE morning to lock in his control while the world still mourned me. She prepared the breach sequence that would hijack the virtual conference feed and broadcast. Everything we needed the board to see because my resurrection on screen would expose his crimes and trigger the self-destruct. Lena worked through the night configuring overrides and testing connections because the plan required perfect timing, and she honored my last wish by pushing the pain aside to focus on what came next. She whispered encouragement to the screen as if I could hear her. "We'll end this together, Grandpa, even if it costs everything." Dawn crept closer and the mansion stirred because Marcus prepared his victory speech downstairs, while guards maintained the blockade around my floor. Lena finished the setup and hovered over the activation button because the moment felt right, and the board would log in soon. She took a deep breath and reached to press it. Then the final instruction file opened, automatically, one I left for this exact second. The dark code self-destruct sequence can only be triggered from Victor's bedroom terminal. Lena stared at the words because Marcus had sealed off my entire floor with guards and cameras after the death announcement. The bedroom was locked tight. She was ready to push the button, but the one button that mattered was behind a wall of men loyal to Marcus. The final piece, the activation location, would appear at the right time for the wrong person to see because Marcus himself would enter my room soon to pay respects or remove evidence. Lena closed her eyes for a moment and smiled through the remaining tears because she knew what she had to do. She had to find a way into that room before Marcus realized the true plan. The resurrection waited, and she was the only one who could make it happen. Lena stood in her room with the activation sequence ready and the board meeting about to begin while Marcus prepared his victory speech. Downstairs, believing he had won everything at last, she pushed aside the last echoes of betrayal because Grandpa's plan, painful as it was, aimed at destroying dark code forever, and that purpose felt bigger than her hurt. She honored his wish by focusing on the task ahead and used Orion to create distractions throughout the mansion because lights flickered. Indistant wings and alarms chimed falsely in the basement while guards rushed to check phantom breaches. Lena slipped from her room in soft footsteps and used the service corridor she knew from childhood games because the chaos pulled every guard away from my floor long enough for her to reach the sealed door. She overrode the lock with a hidden code I left for emergencies and pushed inside my bedroom where the monitors still showed flat lines from the night before. I sat up in bed waiting, pale but alive, eyes bright with the fire I had hidden for months. Lena stopped in the doorway, tears fresh because seeing me move after. Believing I was gone felt like a miracle and a confirmation all at once. "Grandpa," she whispered while crossing the room and taking my hand. "We don't have much time," I said softly because the board meeting had just convened online and Marcus's face filled the main screen in the study downstairs as he began, speaking about assuming full control in light of my tragic passing. Lena connected her laptop to the terminal beside my bed and initiated the breach because Orion hijacked the virtual conference feed and replaced Marcus's prepared slides with the evidence we collected. The accident reconstruction proving Eliza's murder, the DNR audio in Marcus's own voice, the dark code surveillance list showing his true power. The board members' faces appeared on screen one by one because the meeting went live with my resurrection as I leaned forward and spoke clearly for the first time in months. "Gentlemen, ladies, I'm very much alive," I said while Marcus burst into the feed from downstairs, demanding to know how this was possible. I played the recordings calmly because the accident model ran in crystal clarity, showing the sensors disabled by his command, and his voice filled the call discussing my planned death. Marcus shouted over me that it was all fake, that I staged everything, that I was never sick at all. He revealed the truth in his panic because he screamed that I was his biological father and that I paid him years ago to marry into the family and play the villain role. The board went silent. I accepted it all without denial because I looked straight into the camera and said, yes, Marcus is my son from a relationship long ago. And yes, I paid him to deceive everyone because the only way to force dark code into the open and destroy it forever was to create a war no one could ignore. I pressed the button on my medical wrist device, the one monitoring my condition, and triggered the global self-destruct sequence, because dark code feeds began erasing worldwide, while backups burned and access points shut down permanently. Marcus lunged toward the study door, screaming. Threats, but security teams, alerted by the board, arrived within minutes because police took him into custody for Eliza's murder with evidence. No court could dismiss. I turned to Lena and took her hand because the company I built would never be the same, yet the monster I created was finally dead. The mansion is yours now, I said quietly while transferring ownership. Documents she had prepared. Turn it into the technology transparency organization we talked about. Watchdog for the future, never again a weapon. Lena cried but smiled through tears because redemption felt real and heavy in that moment. Marcus was gone in handcuffs. Dark code was gone forever, and the family secrets lay bare but healed. I recovered fully in the weeks that followed because the illness reversed once the drugs left my system and I chose responsibility over rest while Lena led the new organization with strength I always knew she had. We turned Azure Mansion into a place of light instead of shadows because every room once cold, with secrets now opened to researchers and advocates ensuring technology served people and never controlled them again. Justice came for Eliza. Redemption came for me. And love, real, forgiving love, came for Lena because she carried us all forward. And karma, God's justice, always finds its way. My dear friend, we've reached the end of this long, painful, beautiful journey together. Every secret is out. Every sacrifice has found its meaning. Marcus is gone. Dark code is dead. And the Azure Mansion, once cold with lies, now stands as a place of light, watching over technology so it never hurts people again. Lena and I, we're healing. Slowly, with truth between us instead of shadows. Did you like my story? I poured my heart into telling it for you, because I know so many of you have carried your own heavy burdens, given everything for family, and wondered if anyone would ever see your worth. What city are you from, my sweet friend? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and your words keep me going. If this story touched you, if it made you cry, or hope, or feel less alone, please see me in the comments. Share your own story. I've been through that too. Many of you say, and I want to hear yours. If you can, support me with a super thanks. Even the smallest amount helps me keep telling these real-life stories that remind us love and justice still win in the end. Thank you so much for your amazing support. You are the reason I keep sharing these hearts with you. On screen, you'll see 2 new real-life stories I highly recommend. Mothers, grandmothers, women just like you who found their strength when everything seemed lost. There are many more stories waiting on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss one. See you in the next story, my dear. With all my love and respect, Victor.